have Mike Kiernan with us today. And first off, what I know, you're an entrepreneur by day, a doctor by night, but you also act. I'm pretty confused. So, can you elaborate?
Every time someone introduces me, I think, I wonder how they're going to get out of this. And I also think, maybe I'm going to learn something that will help me explain things to my wife. And I would say, maybe even argue that there's a unity beneath the activities that maybe only I could see. But I would, the entrepreneurship thing is something which I would say is a new way of expressing a lot of the same gestures. And that the acting is something where I didn't ever do theater until I moved here. And one of my very good friends, David Getton, who's a playwright and teacher here. And as a consequence of that, I think, I got a phone call one day saying, we're looking for an alpha male. Who gave you this number? And I got cast. My wife says I always get cast as a jerk. I would say that's the most fun kind of thing to play on stage. But that there is a yoke between doctor and actor. And how many of you ever been to the emergency room at Ford Hospital? How many of you were asked, if you're students, how many of you were asked if you had visited the health center first? So it's one of those things where when somebody decides to go to an emergency room, they made that decision for reasons that are entirely valid to their reality. And one of the most unkind things we can do, when I say, did you call your doctor? It is saying, I don't recognize that reality as valid. When you are portraying someone on stage, you can try and walk in their shoes. But there's an expression in coma where the person is seeing through their eyes. So there's times when people are in a coma and their eyes are open, but they're not seeing through their eyes. There's another stage of coma where you're capable of seeing through your eyes. And so much further than standing in someone's shoes is to see through another person's eyes and recognizing the validity of their reality. And I would submit that you can do a winking, even accurately portrayed gestural acting performance. But if you're not seeing through the validity of that person's eyes, even if you're playing a jerk, if you don't have that valid reality, you don't recognize that reality as valid, you will read as false from 100 yards away like Galvin Horse. And that whenever I find myself wanting to ask a patient, did you call your doctor first? That's a signal to me that I'm beginning to lose my perspective, because this person's reality is valid to them. And if I come at them with I happen to be the MD, right? I come with my training and my reality, and you come with what? How long have you had this? 6 hours, 6 weeks, 6 minutes? There's no right answer. 6 weeks, 6 minutes. Didn't you wait? There's sort of a way that you can very unkindly treat someone as if their reality is not valid. That is one of the reasons I think every clinician, not just doctors, every clinician should do theater. And I think a lot of us should do theater to understand the instrument and understand that valid reality question, because that gets into the whole empathy question of innovation. And I would say that that gets into much what happens in the realm of teaching. I think teaching is a special light shines on people who dedicate their lives to being midwives for another human's reaching their potential. And that extraordinary gesture involves a great deal of that saying, So that's my current way of explaining the yoke between all of you.
Okay.
That I get at.
I'm curious to know, you mentioned about this gesture. I'm a little confused by, now does that apply to each kind of sphere you have in your life?
I would say that, one of the interesting things is I'm 58 and I'm still iterating. So, you folks who are students here, congratulations. You've gotten the mantle of success laid across your shoulders for 4 years. And then something's coming next, and there's so much pressure to answer that what you're going to do next question. An excessive amount of pressure. It's quite public. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You have to come up with that answer that's as cool or cooler than being a student at Middlebury College. For that. And I would say over the course of the many years, I wouldn't say that answer should be recognized as in a context. This is just one step of many, many steps you're going to make, informed by a value system or a sensibility that creates the gesture of your life. And so I do feel much more sort of continuity between the things I've done, because I feel that's what it's all about, is that gesture. And that discovering that is based on a lot of understanding what matters to you most, but also understanding what your, in a very modest way, what your strengths are. You bring just naturally, by virtue of who you are, to your interactions, that will lead you to those decisions you have to make.
Talking about what matters to you most, I think, could you elaborate to us what be the change your startup needs to do?
Thank you. What matters to you question is that part of what this series centers on. And I would first start with trying to answer that and then trying to pivot and try and be the change into it. And I would say that what matters to me, I think that existence is a very solitary experience. And that developing a self-compassion to enjoy that and feel nurtured by the solitary nature of so much of our time is part of the task. But that what matters most to me in my life are moments where I bridge the chasm between myself and another person. And there's sort of this beehive of thoughts, and this heart full of hopes and fears, and this distance between us. And that when I had those moments of, when you're happy, it's rare and it's special, but a special sense of shared existence with another person. Those are the things that really, really gun my jets. That's really the thing that matters most to me. And I can think an order of importance would be, with my family and my wife and my daughters, and with patients and the students and colleagues, but also with somebody from a completely, with some of the most extraordinary experiences of that sense of connection, love, if you will, with someone with whom I share almost nothing from another part of the planet. You've had these things, and they make you feel different about humans as a species and about life, and perhaps even someone who I disagree with in many, many fundamental ways. Those moments of communion are really profound and really nurturing, no matter what. Be the Change is a venture that I'm embarked on now since 2015, and that came from the fact that things were changing with my role here at the college. There was a professor, Michael Claudon. Raise your hand if you remember Michael Claudon. 37 years here at the college, and he saw me perform in Our Town. We did Our Town in 2007 at the Town Hall Theater, and I played a role called the stage manager, which is somebody who walks around and talks, so it was not really acting. And then I gave a speech because we did a celebration for Martin Luther King's holiday at the chapel, and it was the tsunami occurred, Christmas. And so he saw those two things. We teach my students how to do that. What do you mean, teach them how to get up with their feet, speak? And I said, yeah, I happen to love that. And I've been somebody, it's been a fascination all my life. I think it's really, really an amazing thing about human beings, that one person can stand for many with her hands empty, say words, and change the course of humankind. It's sometimes been used to our detriment, but it is something special about humans. And so Gandhi and King have been people I've studied great interest all my life. And that's how I got started in 2007 doing persuasive speaking here at the college. And then after watching the growth of the program as Jessica Holmes became the faculty leader of the mid-core program, and see now that the amazing Crystal Brown is going to take it and it'll be wonderful and different in the same way Jessica's was wonderful and different than what Matthew Guadon had created. There was a sense that this chapter was closing, and that was not without some sense of loss, right? And the team, we love one another very, very much, and we miss one another very, very much. And so there was I was home from Tahoe, where the program was out in Tahoe. You were out there that summer. And I was on the radio listening to an interview with a guy named Norman Lear. Raise your hand if you ever heard of Norman Lear. Norman Lear created a television show in the 1970s called All in the Family. And All in the Family was groundbreaking in the way that it portrayed life as it was actually lived. The central character was a guy named Archie Bunker, who was by then what we do now define as the Trump constituency. This is a very old school character, and his difficulty in managing the new world was the central story of this really amazing, groundbreaking show. Well, he's being interviewed, Norman Lear, the guy who created this show, on the radio. And I'm back from Tahoe to take care of bees for a few weeks, and do a bunch of ER shifts, and then head back there for your guys' money. And I catch this on the radio. And Norman Lear is talking about, the interviewer is saying, Mr. Lear, you're 93 years old. How do you account for the extraordinary productivity you still have at age 93 and the amazing number of chapters? And like he said, two words. Two words that get used all the time, but not in this way. First one is over, the second one is next. You can waste a lot of your life, you pour a lot of bitterness into things that are over, over, and not open the door to what comes next. In between those two words is a little hammer. That's being in the present. And that was his answer on that little radio show in July, and it was exactly what I needed. And so this is something where the process of moving on, you're going to have things in your life that are going to break your heart. And the process of moving on from the role of the college, which I love, I still get to work with some in the school environment. I get to do programs with Dartmouth and Middlebury. But the process of moving on really meant opening the door to what comes next. And my wife, who was going to be here, and I told her you don't need to be perfect everything I have to say. But she has heard me talk about new ideas all the time. And she knows if she just pays no attention, in a couple of days I'll come up with something else. She's always said, just pick one. Just pick one, because a lot of the ideas, she'll see it in the landscape. Like 10 years later, look, there's your damn, So it frustrates her. So I picked Be the Change because if you saw the 7-year-old, my brother Steve was here, if you saw the 7-year-old Kiernan, you would have seen somebody who was completely fascinated by insects and had dug up ants into a little thing and made ant farms inside the house. And I'd watch with a flashlight at night. My mother said, "Why are all these ants in the house?" Like, don't step on them. So this is something where I was studying my pre-med time when there was the university where I was at. They had a great center for entomology, and I was like, humans, and became a physician. I spent 30 years doing that, and I'm still a physician, but now I get to take care of bugs. That's what I'm at.
talked about how starting this venture, you lay out you've been in position for so many years. What was the actual? I mean, you said that your wife was just pick one. Why was this one?
Well, I'll tell you that it wasn't the positive and successful business model. And that's never been my strength. Though there's a lot of products out there, but there's, way back, I wrote a letter to Smith Corona and suggested that I had 4 suggestions for the typewriter keyboard, and the only one they took was the little dot on the F, the SDF, JKL semicolon. So all those little dots that you find on home road, that kind of stuff. A couple years later, every typewriter had them. But stuff's out there, but this is something where, this is something I care about. And I'd like to actually segue, if I may, and tell the story of Be the Change. Is that okay with everybody? I had some visuals. I've got a whole slideshow, is that okay with you? A whole slideshow, but I think this is one of those moments when we have an awareness now of honeybees and the trouble they're in. And that's important to recognize. I'll talk a little bit about that, but that is what at the center of Be the Change. So we're going to have a little educational portion here with some pretty pictures. What's that? You don't even know what it is, what kind of bee? Bumblebee? Really charismatic, little chubby things, right? There are 17 species of bumblebee in this region. The bee has sort of 3 major body parts. It has the head, has the thorax where the wings attach, and it has the rear end, which we call the abdomen. The abdomen has 6 little external segments that have colorings that identify which of the bumblebees you're working with. So this one has 1 yellow stripe and 5 black stripes, which identify it as Bombus impatiens, like the flower with an S, impatiens. About 90% of the bees you're going to see in this county are going to be Bombus impatiens. If one flies by, you say, I think that's Bombus impatiens. You're going to get an A. Below it. This one's different. 3 different colors. Band of yellow, 2 bands of orange, band of yellow, and black. Very handsome. 3 colors, therefore, Bombus ternarius. Bombus ternarius, Bombus impatiens. So different stages of life, there's some differences in coloring, but this is mostly what you're going to see of these 2 species. Here it gets a little harder. This is a photo in the first solar field I worked in of Bombus borealis, one you don't see very often in this region. And it has, as you can see, the yellow stripes in its rear end, more like you think of what a classic bee. You can barely appreciate it has a yellow face, or a little yellow on its face. The photo shows that better. But those are the markings of Bombus borealis. One more for you here. Quite similar. This is a field we just planted in New Haven, Vermont. You can see yellow stripes looks a lot the same, right? It'd be hard to tease those 2 apart. Bombus fervidus. Fervidus has no yellow on the face, but when it's got its head and chithonia like this, it might get a little yellow pollen on it. So it's a little bit of a challenge. And it sure helps to have a camera or a phone to catch it and slow it down, because on a galloping horse, it is hard to identify. Good, you caught the most important thing. Bombus fervidus. Take care. So pretty much those are the only bumblebees you need to worry about in this part. If you're going to identify bumblebees, which one is that one? Borealis. This one? Remember this. 3 colors means it's ternarius and impatiens. That's what I went to. So the interesting thing is, of those 17 species that we have in the region, anybody, except for you guys who are younger than age 21, when you were born, we had all 17 species. And now we're down to 10. And of those 7 that are endangered, 4 are gone. Gone. It doesn't matter what habitat you build, they ain't coming back. They're gone. There's an ordinary rate of species loss for invertebrates, which would suggest if we lost our first, let's say we lost the bombus impatiens 21 years ago, we would expect to lose the 4th species into the year 3,400. 97% of the species on Earth are invertebrates. 97% of the species on Earth are invertebrates, but the vertebrates control the media. Pretty much. Fireflies do a little bit, but there's pretty much nothing else. It's just one of those moments when we've got such an abundance of biomass of invertebrates that we can scarcely say we notice, and especially if we think of them mostly as pests. This, I don't even know what it is. It's California, that house. Looks just like an apple orchard, doesn't it? This is almond orchards. Good job. Almond orchard. There are 900,000 acres of almond orchards in California, and you've probably heard about the water content of producing these almonds. Interestingly, if you plant an almond tree and it blossoms, bless you, blossoms in California, you will get no almonds. Because as you imagine, there's something really aesthetically pleasing about this verdant pasture with all those ending into the distance, almonds in bloom. 2.5 weeks later, it's going to be a monoculture, or duoculture. There'll be grass and trees, and nothing for pollinators. So they've lost their native pollinators to such a degree that they're now trucking in honeybees. 2 hives per acre. That's 1.8 million hives. So you know a hive has those bodies, the boxes. A deep box, 2 of them stacked, that's a hive. About 30,000 bees in there. You can put 6 of them on a pallet. You can stack those pallets 3 high and put 400 of them on a truck. That means somewhere in the vicinity of 4,500 semi-trucks with bees crisscrossing the country in California, from all over the country, assembling there for a couple weeks, pollinating there, and then being distributed around the country. If you were a bee disease and you wanted to design a way of getting around, think about the white-nosed bat disease, because they hibernate together. Well, bees don't hibernate together. Well, we are effectively hibernating together. There's only 3 million hives in the country. 1.8 million are going to California. 2016, 46% of the hives didn't make it through the winter. So who's heard of the Varroa destructor, Mike? All right, Varroa destructor is one of those small critters that is in the same order as ticks. It feeds on the young bees. Varroa destructor is one that arrived here from Russia in the 1970s and 80s and was distributed around the country because of management practices like this. There's another mite called Tropholylaps clarii. Anybody heard of it before? Today is the day you heard about Tropholylaps clarii. Tropholylaps clarii is arriving from Asia, just as the Russian disease did. And it has the same pattern. We're about where we were in 1990. It's likely to be spread across this country in the next decade and a half, and will probably eliminate the commercial bee industry. Because the Asian bee, which lived for centuries with a parasitic coexistence relationship, it doesn't, the European honeybee, the non-native European honeybee that we think of as the workhorse of pollination, doesn't have that relationship. To put all of our eggs in this one fragile, beleaguered species, the honeybee, is a grievous error. These are people in southwest China trying to pollinate by hand. They actually started this practice in the 1980s to preserve a particularly highly valued pair. And you can pollinate some pairs by hand. If you cut an apple in half and you get 6 seeds, that means each of the ovules got a pollen grain. It's very hard to do by hand. It's very hard for me to picture myself in the top branches. And so almost all vanilla beans are hand pollinated. Much of the passion fruit in South America is hand pollinated because they've lost their pollinators. It doesn't mean that your granddaughter's wedding festival can't have a fruit salad. It just means it may be impossibly expensive. So a strategy that works towards a diversity of pollinators, There are 275 native bees in this state, 275 bee species in this state. An equal number of, almost equal number of butterflies, many more moths and beetles and flies, and mosquitoes that pollinate. So creating a habitat that is diverse to allow those to succeed is the essence. There's our playing fields, right? This is a place where people live the connection between our energy consumption and the climate change and the sustainability of our earth. And that's the big picture, but it's not the entirety of the big picture. My mom was born in around 1930. We had 2 billion people. We had, in the year 1800, we reached 1 billion people. 1930, 130 years later, 2 billion people. If I live long enough, I'll see the population of this earth triple. We mint a new billion people about every 12 and a half years. And that means every place where we're looking at a monoculture, like the turf grass that we plant as lawn, around municipal buildings, as a way of saying, I am here, we should be asking why. Because there's an opportunity. This green space is the white space. So what we're doing is planting to support pollinators in solar fields. We began in 2015 with a field just south of town here, and now are in 6 different fields around the region with some in the works. They started about 12 months before I did in Minnesota. My friends in Minnesota, they have 2,300 acres planted for pollinators under solar. So there's something you can do, which is speak to your town planning people. Because if you want to plant in Stearns, if you want to put solar in Stearns County, Minnesota, you have to plant for pollinators underneath it. And that's how they got to 2,300 acres. In the same amount of time that we've done almost 100 acres, there are 2,300 acres. We plant the next solar developments and start looking at municipal buildings and other opportunities and planting for pollinators. That can be impactful in a way that will change what will happen in the long term when we get to 10.5 billion people. When we look at these fields in terms of telling the story of impact, we measure the number of unique pollinator encounters. So you walk a 200-foot corridor in 7.5 minutes at the edge and then 7.5 minutes at the center. And those 15 minutes, unique pollinator encounters. So a swallowtail comes across, that's 1. Comes across again, that's not 2, that's just the 1. So you count unique pollinator encounters in 15 minutes. The first year, we got 37 unique pollinator encounters in 15 minutes. Not bad. You get about almost that, we was a former farm field, so you get almost that much walking on campus here. By 1 year later, we got 174 unique pollinator encounters in 15 minutes. So that's impactful. And the impact goes beyond the margins of the solar field because those bees have range outside of it. And if we plant in the next 5 years in the solar fields, just the solar fields that we'll be developing in the next 5 years, if we plant them for pollinators, that'll be enough to pollinate the 9,623 square miles of Vermont, which could take our $20 million apple industry and make it into a $200 million apple industry. And if we do it in a way that spreads to the south, as we're working with folks in Massachusetts, then it can be a corridor of sustaining habitat for the migratory pollinators like the hummingbirds and the monarchs. So that's what we're up to. Thank you for this. Lord, I had a 40-minute version. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm wondering with this, taking you to change, see if there's a larger implication. You being a huge fan of rhetoric, as we know, and being a teacher and advocate of it. Do you see this as it's difficult enough to explain this issue to human beings? Like why should I care? Do you see as rhetoric can take a step further? I think it's visual rhetoric, not just for people to change, but for people to make change in their lives, something they care about, to the next level, to a visual form of education.
I love the question. I think one of my favorite things is trying to tell the story of this, and I'd love to have some feedback on that, because I have many different formats, and I've never used that particular format. I just gave it in and that kind of thing. But it is one of the interesting, fun aspects of the challenges. We're all at different stages of understanding about this, and that one of my favorite things about it is that there are all these species. Well, every one of those butterflies have a larval host species. And for me to understand that, it means I have to get around 175 species of butterflies. So I try to knock it off a couple a month. But I mean, it is an endless well to peer into of fascinating information. How to tell that story in a way that is concise and understandable when we're all on the spectrum of understanding. Most of us have heard about honeybees now, but that's not everyone. Is one of my favorite aspects of the challenge. So I love that difficulty. And I think that the aspect of it that's more generalizable is that this is an effort which is, I would characterize as an attempt to do a healing thing. It's an opportunity space which you might do something healing. And at the very least, the intent is non-harm, and which is at the seat of non-violence as a philosophy. And so, if there's something that propagates in others, it's a sense of the joy you feel when this is good for me and it's good for the planet. All these things that are, I think we're used to as consumers wondering, what is the cost of this thing? Who was injured by this device, or will be injured when I dispose of it? And what is the total cost? That violence content of everything. I think we're all scarcely aware of it. And how do you live when you try to encounter that? So trying to create something that has non-harm at its core, and making that something that is propagated. And so everything we do has to have that as focused sustainability and non-harm. And that would be true. Every product we develop as a consumer product, we try and tell the story of the effort and try and make some of the business such a continuous business model.
Do you see that then with idea of consumers today, that aspect of the story lost? Is that something that do you think that's something that we should bring back?
I actually feel like your generation, as opposed to our generation, which was much we were the raised consciousness. That was the whole thing, raising consciousness. And then I think we've been pretty much asleep in terms of the content of our actions, the impact of our actions on the planet. And meanwhile, we're more of us. And so this is where I do believe that there are other species that are conscious, but I don't believe there's any other species that knows that their time as a species is limited. I think this sort of is part of what's happening in our country, is this sort of sense of doors closing, let me get my stuff all set here. And that people behave differently. If you go into a family and bring in a truck and have 6 bags of rice and beans, you got a problem. If you have rice and beans up to the ceiling, people will stand in line and make sure everybody gets taken care of. This sense of perceived scarcity, I think, is part of the what the hell's become this? Why are we so afraid? Why is fear something that we can play with such extraordinary success? And I think it's just this consciousness that maybe this is it for our species. But I also feel that what defines us as a species is not so much the disposable funds as our ability to collectively problem solve. There are problem solvers in other species, but to get together collectively and problem solve is what defines us. So it's sort of our moment of challenge, not just generation, but as a species, as a civilization. Because when that growth happens, from where we are now to 10.5 billion people, that's not going to be symmetric. 8 billion of those people, more than the current Earth's population, are going to live in the least developed and less developed countries. If the consumption of the more developed countries continues as it is, and we do nothing to address the food insecurity of 8 billion people, then that will not be the first port of the wall. that may be the first border wall they construct. It will not be the last. Razor wire and high fences for all. And we'll call it modern civilization, but it won't be like we are now. So I feel like this is a moment for us, all of us collectively, and that these opportunities to be woke, and have a generation of people that's woke, and are acting accordingly, not blindly and not selfishly, is going to determine our success. That doesn't bum me out.
We talked earlier about you having different spheres of your life, and also how you see kind of like an overarching theme about the gesture. It's all the same gesture, just in different ways. How would you say, though, this venture has changed the way maybe you approach your job as a physician, or even teaching? I mean, you say you're still teaching. Is there a different approach you have now, a different awareness, even just an added sense of empathy for who you're teaching, who you're caring for? Is there something that you'd like us to take away from that?
It's a lovely question, and I have two parts to answer. How much time do you have? Where's part of you? This is all basis that we're going to So on the tell the long answer. I think that it actually hasn't really changed doctor, but I think it's it gives me sort of a more hopeful way of being as I go through my life. That there's at least this portion of it is sort of counterbalancing my really nice house, the car that I drive, the truck that I drive to these fields, my carbon filter. There's a sense of account that I feel more whole as an individual now. That's something I'm addressing.
You also do want to leave time for the audience, especially.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions. Like you said, welcome. Any questions for Mike? We're curious about.
Thank you for sharing with us, and just really quick, I thought that format of the presentation was really great. All the audio visuals we see every day, it's nice to have something different, so just for what that's worth. But my question is, for any of us in the audience who are adults and maybe have a little bit of land to play with, I've often wondered, well, what should I plant if I were going to convert some of this lawn? So what would you recommend? What are you seeing that's successful?
Yeah, so that's a great thought. If you plant an acre of solar field, that's equivalent to 600 6x12 pollinator gardens in people's backyards, but they should do both. Certainly to be impactful, otherwise you just get a fragmented landscape, which has this impact locally. But if we're all embracing this, absolutely. And the answer is, I will come into your backyard anytime we look, happily, and I do it a lot. And that there are lots of learnings from doing this. If you ever just try to grow wildflowers, it's really unrewarding. You get a year of ink, and then the opportunists take over. And this is because of the seed bed. What happens when you till up soil is there's been no ragweed. Well, it's just waiting for the light. It's just sitting there waiting for the light. And then all of a sudden you got a ragweed, which is not a very substantial looking thing, but that's the enemy in terms of allergens. And each plant will give 60,000 seeds. So it's just, you gotta admire it. It's waiting. It's just waiting in the soil. And so a lot of the learnings of this come from the tall grass prairie restoration, where they talk about starting with green soil. Really need to depend on what's there. So we have Western parsnip. It looks like there's some dill, it's kind of beautiful, it's called the ansel. Swallowtails love it. It's a normal host species, but you get it on your skin and it burns. I don't have any scars this year, but last year I was all scarred up from pulling it by hand. It's the bane of my existence because it's biennial, which means every year. So you got to knock it down for 2 years, and then what's ever in the seed bed? Because each one of those plants left 500,000 seeds. It's kind of diabolical, and you got to admire it. So it really depends on starting as much as possible with clean soil. Solarizing is one of the things you can really do with a 6x12 or 8x12 garden bed, which is putting something that's going to a clear plastic or black plastic, but I think clear plastic works a little bit better. Well adhered to really close adhered soil. That will heat it up and kill whatever is in the seed bed, as well as insects that are under there, they'll recover, and then they'll have habitat that'll be ongoing. Starting with a clean soil, then with a pollinator mix that's designed for your local region, which are out there. American Meadows is up in Shelburne, has been terrific. I work with them. There's one, the Search Seeds Society, XER-CES Society, named after a butterfly in California. They formed to try and preserve, but they did not succeed. But they do amazing things, have amazing monographs, and I believe that it should be backyards, roadsides, power lines, municipal buildings. It should be something where we are asking why, and going to our public people and saying why, because why are we mowing this? What a ridiculous activity. You know, I have 3 acres of lawn. I have friends in college that said, if you ever see me mowing 3 acres, I want you to shoot me, so I'm mowing it. I get shot from the trees. No, it's just like, this is ridiculous that we have this, but this is what we do. And it is handsome to see this not you see I'm here, but this is something where every bit of it can be addressed and anything. And there's no harm in doing something small. Something small that you can manage can be a renewable, beautiful place. And there's nothing more rewarding than walking through a space where you saw very few, blossoms that were just bobbing in the breeze. And seeing the next year the bees like, they literally elbow one another out to get at things. And that's just the coolest thing in the world. That's the penalty. So I will help. Anybody who wants to do it, I will help. I know lots of sources for seeds and plants.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Randy. Tell me about have to and get to.
Actually, so I had a professor last semester that one day in class just brought up the idea of if we ever really think about, like we do high school, we go to college, do we ever actually think that who's actually forcing us to be here? Like maybe my state mandated me to do high school for a little bit, but what's actually, do we actually think about why am I doing this? And so this idea of the difference between having to do something and then getting to do something. I mean, personally, where I'm from, Middlebury is a concept. It's nothing. It doesn't mean anything. People don't know what this is. I feel fortunate that I even found this place. And just in general, over the summer, I did Spanish language school this summer. And what I found is that I was speaking, well, grammatically incorrect, obviously, but I was using a verb wrong. So the verb necesitar is to need. It sounds like in English, right? And oftentimes we'll say, oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. And that's fine. I mean, we say that. In Spanish, if I say, if I use necesitar and I say I need to go to class, no, you don't. You need air. You need water. That's what you need. You don't need to do that. So actually, I'd like to take it a step further. Have to and get to. I think the way we're using our language is actually kind of dangerous. And that kind of enlightened me to yes, idea of need instead. And as I go further with Spanish, you can't use that. People don't understand what you're saying. So that's actually a recent adaptation to what I had thought about.
So as we reframe our day going ahead, we could say, I need your Let's do that. Let's go forward. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it very much. anybody wanted to go see a solar field that's still in bloom, I'd be happy to take them. And the way to reach me is through Liz and folks here at PCI.